It was a quiet Saturday evening when someone knocked on my apartment door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. Standing there was my mother, the woman who'd walked out on me when I was 9. She looked older, but her eyes were the same, sharp and cold. Beside her stood a boy about 19, wearing designer clothes and holding his phone like a trophy. "Joshua," she said with a fake smile. "This is your brother, Ethan." Brother? The word hit me like a punch. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. I stepped aside, unsure why she was here after 15 years. She walked in without waiting, her eyes scanning my apartment like she owned it. "So," she said, crossing her arms, "I heard you've done well for yourself. A good job, fancy place. I'm proud of you." Her tone didn't sound proud. It sounded calculating. Ethan slumped on my couch, scrolling through his phone. "Nice TV," he muttered. Something told me this visit wasn't about family. It was about something else, something I wouldn't like. And I was right. I made coffee, mostly to buy time. My mind raced with questions. Why now? Why after all these years? Mom sat on the couch like she'd never left, legs crossed, tapping her nails on the glass table. "You never called," she said suddenly. "You didn't even try to find me." I almost laughed. I didn't try. She was the one who disappeared, leaving me with Dad's unpaid bills and a cold apartment. "I was a kid," I said quietly. She sighed, pretending to look hurt. "You've grown bitter, Joshua. That's not good for your soul." Ethan yawned loudly. "Mom, can we hurry? I'm starving." She shot him a look, then smiled at me again. "We've had some bad luck lately," she said softly. "Your brother's tuition, rent, bills. It's been hard." There it was, the real reason. I leaned back, my coffee untouched. "So you came here for help?" Her eyes sparkled with false innocence. "We're family, aren't we? Families help each other." Ethan grinned, finally looking up from his phone. "Yeah, bro. You can totally afford it." That word, bro, made my stomach turn. Family, I thought. Right. Only when it's convenient. For the next hour, Mom talked non-stop about her tough life. Lost jobs, rising bills, and how nobody cared enough to help. She said the words with tears, but her eyes stayed dry. I listened quietly. Years of coding had taught me patience, and right now, silence was my best weapon. When she finally paused, I asked, "How much do you need?" Love revenge stories? Subscribe now. We drop new ones every week, raw, emotional, and full of justice. Don't miss the next chapter. Her face brightened. "Oh, just a small favor, sweetheart. Maybe 5,000. Until things get better." 5,000. To her, it was small. To me, it was an obvious test, to see how far she could push. I nodded slowly. "Let me think about it." Later that night, I stepped out to take a call. As I returned, I stopped at the door when I heard voices. Ethan laughed. "Told you, Mom. He's a total softie. He'll pay." "Of course he will," she said. "He owes me for raising him." Raising me? She hadn't even stayed long enough to teach me how to ride a bike. I stood there quietly, my heart cold and heavy. Now I knew their plan. They weren't here for family. They were here for my money. And this time, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, I found Mom cooking breakfast like she lived there. Bacon sizzled, and Ethan sat at the table, grinning like a king. "Morning, sweetheart," she said cheerfully. "I thought I'd make you something nice. You work too hard." I glanced at the mess in my spotless kitchen. You didn't have to. Oh, come on, she said. Can't a mother care for her son without suspicion? Her voice dripped with guilt. I could feel the old hooks she used when I was a kid. The same tone she used before vanishing with my savings jar. Ethan shoveled food into his mouth. So, Josh, what car you driving now? Bet it's something expensive. Mom gave him a warning look, then sighed. We just want to reconnect, honey. But it's hard when you keep pushing us away. I clenched my jaw. You left me. Remember? Her eyes glistened instantly. I had no choice. You don't understand what I went through. The act was flawless, years of practice. I realized then, this wasn't just a request for help. It was emotional blackmail. And she was playing the same game she'd always played, only this time, I wasn't the scared kid she left behind. By the third day, the air in my apartment felt heavy. Mom had stopped pretending to be sweet. Ethan left dirty dishes everywhere, blasting music and laughing like he owned the place. That evening, Mom sat across from me, her arms folded tightly. Joshua, enough games, she said. We need help, and you have more than enough to give. I kept my voice calm. How much are we talking about? She didn't hesitate. 20,000. I blinked. Excuse me. For Ethan's tuition, she said firmly. You're his brother. You should want him to have the chances you didn't. Ethan smirked. Yeah, dude. You're loaded. Don't be stingy. A low anger burned in my chest. I thought about the nights I starved, the part-time jobs, the years alone. Nobody helped me then. Mom, I said slowly, I worked for everything I have. You can't just walk in and demand money. Her tone turned cold. After all I did for you. You're so ungrateful. I carried you for 9 months. I looked straight at her. And then you walked away for 15 years. Her face hardened. You'll regret talking to me like that, Joshua. Maybe I would. But not in the way she expected. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their words echoed in my mind: demand, entitlement, ungrateful. I remembered the nights Dad worked double shifts while I crawled into bed hungry and tired. Mom's face flashed before me, smiling, then disappearing into the night years ago. The memory still stung, sharp as broken glass. I had tried to forget, to focus on building my life, my career, my independence. But now, with her standing in my apartment and Ethan lounging like he owned everything, the old wounds tore open. I thought about all the times I had sacrificed, missing birthdays, working odd jobs, staying late at school to earn scholarships. Every effort, every tear, every sleepless night, she had missed. And now she acted like she had a right to my success. I clenched my fists under the table. Anger mixed with a strange, familiar sadness. Betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about every moment she had abandoned me, and now she tried to rewrite history. Tomorrow, I decided, I would confront them. Not with tears. Not with fear. This time, I wouldn't be a scared boy. This time, I would take control. And maybe, just maybe, I'd make them pay for the years they stole. The next morning, I went to work, but I couldn't focus. Mom's words kept spinning in my mind, and Ethan's smug grin replayed over and over. By lunch, my phone buzzed. A message from a distant cousin I barely spoke to: heard about your mom visiting, hope you're helping them out. My stomach sank. Somehow, she had already started spreading stories about me being selfish and refusing family. I clenched my phone, anger bubbling. Mom hadn't just come for money, she was using everyone to pressure me. Ethan called later, voice dripping with entitlement. Come on, bro, don't make this hard. You don't want family talking bad about you, right? Family. That word felt hollow. It wasn't about love, it was about control. I realized then that every interaction, every word they said, was a test. They wanted to see how far I could be pushed before giving in. I couldn't let them win. I made a decision. Calmly, I would let them think they had power while I figured out how to turn the tables. If they wanted a battle of wills, they would get one. But they wouldn't know it was coming. That evening, Mom and Ethan returned, uninvited. I froze when I saw them standing at my door, grinning like predators. "Joshua," Mom said sweetly, "we just want to talk. You know, family stuff." Ethan leaned against the wall, scrolling through his phone. "Yeah, bro. You wouldn't want anyone thinking you're mean, right?" His words were sharp, carrying an unspoken threat. My heart sank. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. They weren't here for conversation. They were testing me. Mom stepped closer, voice soft but firm. "We're counting on you, Joshua. It's only fair. Don't make us beg." Ethan smirked. "Everyone's talking, bro. You don't want people thinking you're stingy." I realized then that they were trying to trap me. If I gave in, I'd become their pawn. If I refused, they could ruin my reputation with lies and manipulation. I clenched my fists but kept my voice calm. "I'm not afraid of threats." Mom's smile faltered, and Ethan rolled his eyes. "You will be," he muttered. I let them in, but I knew one thing for sure, this game had rules, and I was going to change them. Tomorrow, I would make my first move. The next day, I acted normal. I laughed at Mom's stories, nodded at Ethan's complaints, and pretended to consider their needs. Inside, I was calculating. Years of being underestimated had taught me patience. They thought they were in control, but they had no idea I had a plan. I watched Ethan scroll through his phone, bragging about my apartment and my salary. Mom fussed over small details, like my kitchen appliances, making sure I noticed her presence. I smiled politely, saying, "I'll see what I can do," every time they asked for money. But in truth, I wasn't planning to give them a single dollar. Instead, I began setting traps. I recorded conversations, noting every demand, every lie, every hint of entitlement. Emails, texts, even social media posts, they were all being documented. By evening, I had a clear picture: they wanted money, reputation, and control. They wanted to guilt me into submission. But this time, I wouldn't let them. Tonight, I reviewed my evidence, imagining the look on their faces when the truth came out. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of power. The hunters were about to become the hunted. 2 days later, Mom called again, her voice sweet as syrup. "Joshua, honey, we've been thinking, maybe you could just loan us the money. We'll pay you back, of course." I almost laughed. A loan. That was her new trick. She never repaid Dad a cent when she left him, but she thought I'd fall for the same act. "I'll think about it," I said calmly, knowing every word was recorded. Then came the real catch. Ethan wanted to move in with me, temporarily, while attending college nearby. "Just a few months, bro," he said. "We'll be out before you know it." I could hear Mom whispering in the background, feeding him lines. I agreed, on one condition. "Sure," I said, "but I'll need a signed rental agreement. House rules, you know." There was a long pause. I could almost feel Mom's anger boiling through the phone. She wanted free access to my life and my money, but I'd just turned her manipulation into paperwork, something she couldn't twist. When the call ended, I smiled to myself. They thought I was still that desperate boy they left behind. They were wrong. The real game was only beginning. A week later, Ethan arrived at my apartment with a duffel bag and a smug grin. Mom followed behind, arms crossed, pretending to be polite. "Thanks for letting him stay," Mom said. "He'll be careful, right?" I nodded slowly, keeping my tone neutral. "Of course. Just follow the rules." Ethan dropped his bag on the floor and immediately slouched on the couch, kicking off his shoes. "Man, this place is sick. Can I borrow your gaming console later?" Mom smiled nervously, glancing at me as if to gauge my reaction. Inside, my mind raced. This was my apartment, the sanctuary I had built from years of struggle, and now they were intruding, claiming it like theirs. I decided to test them. I left my laptop open, pretending to work. Then, I watched. Within hours, Ethan was poking around, clicking files, scrolling through my emails, his curiosity barely concealed. Mom noticed, then laughed it off. "He's just looking, honey. Don't mind him." But I knew better. They weren't just staying, they were probing, mapping, planning. And tonight, I decided, I would make them pay for even thinking they could cross me. That night, I waited until Ethan fell asleep on the couch, snoring with his phone in hand. Mom had already gone to bed in the guest room, after inspecting every corner of my apartment like she owned it. Quietly, I slipped into my office and checked my laptop. Just as I suspected, the browsing history showed recent activity. My banking site had been opened, twice. So they were after my money, not my company. I smiled coldly and plugged in a small USB drive, security software I'd written myself. It recorded every keystroke, screenshot, and access attempt. If they touched my system again, I'd have proof. The next morning, I acted calm, offering breakfast like nothing was wrong. Mom complimented my cooking, Ethan complained about the Wi-Fi. Then, I accidentally left my bank statement on the counter, just visible enough to tempt them. It showed a fake account balance, something impressive enough to catch their greed. By evening, I checked my software logs. Just as planned, Ethan had tried to log in again, and Mom had helped. They thought they were playing me. But they just triggered the first step of my revenge. By the next morning, I had everything I needed, screenshots, timestamps, even audio of their whispered conversations. They talked about transferring money, borrowing, passwords, and how Joshua wouldn't even notice. I noticed. When Mom went out grocery shopping with my card, without asking, I didn't stop her. I wanted her to dig her own hole. Ethan stayed behind, blasting music and accidentally knocking over my mail pile. I watched him slip one envelope into his hoodie pocket. A credit card offer. Exactly what I wanted him to steal. I'd planted it with a fake number linked to a tracking system. By the time they tried to activate it, I'd know exactly where and when. That night, Mom came home smiling, pretending nothing had happened. "I picked up dinner for us," she said. I thanked her, acting grateful, while transferring all my real savings into a hidden account. The trap was set. In a few days, they'd try to use what they stole. And when they did, their own actions would expose them completely. No shouting. No fighting. Just cold, quiet justice. The same way they'd treated me all those years ago. The day they tried to use the fake card, everything changed. I watched the tracking app ping a store across town. Ethan walked in, Mom close behind, smiling like they owned the world. They tried to buy a new phone and some expensive headphones. The clerk asked for ID, Ethan fumbled, and Mom handed over a driver's license that did not match. Their confidence cracked, but they kept pushing. Outside, I called Dad and my lawyer. I did not want drama, only truth. Inside the store, the manager grew suspicious, checked the card details. It failed. Ethan's face went pale. Mom grabbed his arm and whispered curses. Security stepped in, the manager called the number linked to the card. Soon the police arrived and asked questions. Ethan stammered. Mom tried to charm them, but the audio and logs I had made told a different story. Later at home, Ethan paced the living room, useless anger boiling. Mom stared at me, her smile gone. For the first time she looked small. I felt no joy in their trouble. I felt the long weight lifting, like a locked door opening after years of being shut. The next morning, the apartment felt lighter. Mom and Ethan were gone, taken in for questioning and escorted by the police. I didn't feel triumphant, only calm, like the storm had passed. I sat at my desk, reviewing the logs one last time. Every attempt they had made, every lie, every manipulation, it was all documented. I realized revenge wasn't about anger anymore, it was about reclaiming control. Dad called later, his voice warm but cautious. "Are you okay, Josh?" "I am," I said, keeping my tone steady. "They won't bother us anymore." He sighed, a mix of relief and pride. "You handled it, well." I couldn't be prouder. I smiled, imagining the boy I once was, small, scared, and alone, finally standing tall. That night, I didn't celebrate or boast. I simply locked my laptop, closed the blinds, and let the quiet settle in. No threats, no guilt, no manipulation. For the first time in years, my home felt truly mine. Mom and Ethan had tried to control me, to use my kindness against me. Instead, I had turned their game around. And now, the real peace began. The days after their removal were peaceful, but I knew healing wasn't just about keeping them out. I had to rebuild trust in myself and in others. I spent mornings at work, focusing on projects that mattered. My evenings were different, no schemes, no plotting, just reading, exercising, and reconnecting with the life I had almost lost to fear. Dad visited often. We cooked together, laughed over old memories, and shared moments that reminded me of what family should feel like. Slowly, the anger inside me softened, replaced with a quiet determination to protect what was mine without letting resentment control me. I reached out to old friends, the people who had supported me when I was a kid scraping by. Their encouragement reminded me that loyalty wasn't tied to blood. One night, I sat on the balcony, the city lights flickering below. I realized how much I had grown, not just in wealth or status, but in strength and patience. The boy who once feared abandonment was gone. In his place stood a man who could forgive but never forget, who could care without being used. Trust, I learned, wasn't about blind faith. It was about knowing your boundaries, and defending them. Weeks passed, and life began to feel normal again. The constant tension, the fear of intrusion, was gone. But I didn't want to stop at just surviving, I wanted to thrive. One morning, my phone buzzed with an unexpected email from a tech startup in another city. They had noticed my work and offered me a position as lead data analyst, a role with a significant raise and room for growth. I felt excitement, but also hesitation. Moving meant leaving Dad behind, the apartment I had fought to protect, and the city that had been my proving ground. Still, I knew opportunity waited for no one. I discussed it with Dad, who, after a moment of concern, smiled warmly. "You've earned this, Joshua. Don't let fear hold you back." I accepted the offer. The decision wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming my life, my independence, and my future. That evening, I looked at my apartment, once a battlefield, now a sanctuary. Every corner reminded me of lessons learned, patience, strategy, and standing firm. Mom and Ethan had tried to define me with fear and greed. But I had written my own rules. And now, I was ready to step into a new chapter, stronger, wiser, and unstoppable. A week after accepting the new position, I returned home from work to find a message from an old friend, Marcus. He had heard rumors about Mom and Ethan's schemes and wanted to meet. Curious, I agreed. At the cafe, Marcus leaned in, lowering his voice. "Josh, they've been talking. Not just about money, they're spreading lies about you. Saying you abandoned Dad, that you're selfish. People are starting to believe it. My stomach tightened. Even after everything, Mom still tried to control perceptions. I nodded, thinking fast. This wasn't just about me, it was about everyone I cared for. If people believed her, it could hurt Dad, my friends, even my new job prospects. I realized I needed allies, not just defenses. I decided to test who was truly loyal. I sent carefully worded messages, gauging reactions without revealing too much. The ones who genuinely cared offered support, concern, and advice. The ones swayed by gossip, silence or excuses. It was painful but necessary. By nightfall, I had clarity, trust was earned, not given. Mom and Ethan couldn't touch me physically anymore, but their lies were still weapons. And I had to be ready, not just to defend myself, but to strike strategically when the moment came. The following morning, I began implementing a plan. Mom and Ethan had underestimated me at every turn, thinking their threats and lies would always work. Now, it was my turn to dictate the game. First, I contacted my lawyer, Mark, to ensure all past incidents, email hacking, attempted bank access, and intrusion, were fully documented. This created a legal safety net. Next, I discreetly informed close colleagues about potential misinformation spreading, framing it as a precaution. Meanwhile, I set subtle traps for Mom and Ethan. I created a fake investment opportunity, carefully designed to appeal to their greed. I sent hints that I was sharing a portion of my wealth with friends, knowing Mom would try to involve herself. Within days, they fell for it. Emails, calls, and attempts to access information came flooding in. Every move was logged and saved. By evening, I had a comprehensive map of their manipulations, revealing not just greed, but arrogance. They assumed I was naive, too kind to retaliate. I leaned back in my chair, satisfied. Every action they took now strengthened my position. The scales were tipping. Mom and Ethan had thought they were always in control. Soon, they would discover that the hunter had become the hunted. The evening air was thick with tension when Mom and Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. I had anticipated this moment for weeks, every step calculated. Mom smiled, that practiced warmth that used to fool me. Ethan lounged on the couch, phone in hand, confident as ever. "Joshua," Mom said sweetly, "we just want to talk." I gestured toward the living room, inviting them to sit. But this time, the power had shifted. "Before we start," I said calmly, "I think it's important you know I'm aware of everything, every lie, every scheme, every attempt to take what isn't yours." Mom's eyes flickered, her smile faltering. Ethan stiffened, dropping his phone. I pulled out a folder containing screenshots, email logs, and recordings. "This shows the hacking attempts, the bank access, and your manipulations. I've given copies to my lawyer and the authorities. Any further action will have consequences." Silence filled the room. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan's arrogance was gone, replaced by a nervous fidget. "I'm done being afraid," I continued. "I won't be used, threatened, or lied to. Consider this your only warning." Without another word, they left, shoulders tight, faces pale. Finally, the balance had shifted. I had confronted them, not with anger, but with strategy. The days after the confrontation were quiet, almost eerily so. Mom and Ethan didn't call, didn't text, and didn't attempt to show up. Their absence felt like a victory, but I knew it was only the beginning. I spent the morning reviewing my accounts, double-checking security settings. Every lock, every password, every trace of their access attempts was secured. I wanted no openings, no chance for them to return. Then, I drafted a letter. Calm, precise, and final. I outlined my boundaries, making it clear that any future contact would trigger legal action. No threats, just facts. I mailed it and kept a copy for my records. Next, I went through my social media and personal connections. I removed Mom and Ethan from every network. Mutual friends who might spread gossip were quietly informed of the truth. Finally, I informed Dad. "It's done," I said. He nodded, relief in his eyes. "We're safe now, Josh. You did the right thing." For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from their schemes, but from the emotional chains they had wrapped around me since childhood. This wasn't just revenge. It was liberation. I had cut ties. Completely. With Mom and Ethan out of my life for good, I could finally focus on rebuilding, not just my security, but my happiness. I started small. Mornings at work became a time to excel, afternoons a chance to reconnect with friends I had neglected. I signed up for a martial arts class, partly for fitness, partly to remind myself of the strength I now carried, both physically and mentally. Dad and I spent weekends together, cooking, laughing, and revisiting memories that had once brought pain. Our bond, once strained by fear and absence, grew stronger. I also invested time in my personal projects. A side coding venture, paused for years due to Mom's chaos, was revived. Slowly, it began generating extra income, proof that my hard work could flourish without interference. Evenings were peaceful. I sat on the balcony, listening to the hum of the city, reflecting on how far I'd come. The apartment, once a battlefield, now felt like a home. I realized revenge had been a step, not the destination. The real victory was reclaiming life on my terms, safe, secure, and unafraid. For the first time in years, I felt it, true freedom. The move to the new city marked more than a change of address, it was a fresh start. My new office tower, my own apartment, and the independence I had longed for felt like a reward for years of struggle. At work, I quickly earned respect as a lead analyst. Colleagues sought my guidance, and I thrived on solving problems that challenged me. Every late-night coding or analyzing data reminded me how far I'd come from the boy struggling to make ends meet. I also explored the city, meeting new people who became friends rather than obligations. Slowly, I built a network of genuine connections, free from the manipulation and greed of my past. Dad visited once, his pride evident as he walked through my modern apartment. "This is your life now, Joshua," he said. "You've earned every bit of it." I smiled, grateful for his support and sacrifices. At night, I reflected on my journey, the betrayals, the scheming, the revenge, and the victories. Every experience had shaped me, but I now knew that the future didn't belong to fear or anger. It belonged to me. Strong, confident, and free. A new chapter had begun, and this time, I controlled the story. Months passed, and the city became home. I settled into a rhythm of work, friends, and personal growth. No one dictated my actions, no one manipulated my choices. Each morning, I woke with purpose, each evening ended with reflection. I realized independence wasn't just about money or security, it was about mindset. I made decisions for myself, not to please anyone else or to avoid conflict. I also focused on giving back. Remembering my struggles, I started mentoring young men in my field, sharing lessons about resilience, patience, and strategy. Teaching others reminded me how far I'd come and reinforced my own strength. Dad remained a steady presence, a reminder that family could be chosen, not forced. We laughed, argued playfully, and supported each other, no expectations or grudges, just respect. I reflected on Mom and Ethan, now distant and powerless. Their greed had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I had turned their attempts at control into lessons in strategy, patience, and self-reliance. Sitting in my apartment one evening, I smiled. I was no longer the boy hiding behind his fears. I was a man who had claimed his life, his peace, and his independence. And that strength was unshakable. Years later, I looked back on everything, Mom's betrayal, Ethan's arrogance, the endless schemes, and realized they had all led me here. I wasn't bitter, I was stronger. Every challenge had forged resilience, strategy, and patience. My career flourished. I led major projects, mentored rising analysts, and earned respect not through fear, but through skill and integrity. My apartment, once a battleground, now symbolized security, success, and self-determination. I also nurtured the relationships that mattered. Dad was older, slower, but proud. Our bond, tested by hardship, had become unbreakable. Friends who had supported me were still by my side, chosen family who reminded me what loyalty truly meant. I reflected on the lessons I'd learned. Trust was earned, boundaries were sacred, and strength wasn't measured by how much you could fight, but by how wisely you acted. I had turned a life once threatened by manipulation into a story of triumph. And I had begun sharing that story, mentoring others, teaching them that adversity could become advantage. Mom and Ethan faded from my life, irrelevant and powerless. Their legacy was a warning, mine was a blueprint. I smiled, knowing the man I had become, and the life I had built, would endure. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.